So thank you for attending my talk today. I'm going to talk about J.R.R. Tolkien's Catholic faith influences on his translation of the 800-year-old Middle English Breton lay, Sir Orfeo. My name is Camilo Manya Villanueva. I'm a student specializing in teaching literature in the second language classroom. Today, I hope to introduce you to some of the research I've been doing, which came out of a Middle English language graduate class at Murray State. I'm going to show you how I stumbled upon some of his work, Tolkien's work in Middle English, and his English translation. I want to talk a little bit about Tolkien's life and how he became Catholic. And I want to share some of his research interests, one of which was Sir Orfeo. I want to show you why Tolkien may have been interested in it. He created his own Middle English version, actually, of the Breton lay. I want to show you how some of the my work, my data in the line-by-line explication of the lay in the original Middle English with Tolkien's English translation, and how a little bit about how it compares to the base translation from the Auchinleck manuscript, which is used as a kind of a standard. Sir Orfeo was actually in many pieces, and there weren't many that were surviving, but the Auchinleck manuscript is the main one. I also want to know if how significant was Tolkien's translation from into Middle English. What's important here is I'm looking at how his devout faith in Catholicism could have influenced his word choice. And I will conclude with some brief remarks and how there are some flaws in my study and possible future research. So first, before I get into literary analysis, I need to say that I'm not an expert on Middle English or on Catholicism. My interests are in teaching literature, so I analyze a wide range of texts. Like I said, I stumbled upon Sir Orfeo last year, and it was my first in-depth initiation into Middle English. I had a hard time understanding what I read. There was a gloss, but it wasn't like a line-by-line translation. I did find an English translation by Tolkien and another one that I'll mention later. The English translation by Tolkien was a little bit different from the gloss, and that's what led me here. So, but first I want to talk about like who was Tolkien, and he doesn't need an introduction. I believe everyone knows who he was. What I didn't know was that in 1904, when he was 12 years old, his mother died, and he nearly lost his brother. But before his mother died, she had converted to Catholicism, and she converted the boys to Catholicism. When she died, she left the boys to become wards of a Catholic priest. And as many of you know, Tolkien was devout Catholic throughout his whole life. He became an Oxford professor, and as I mentioned, he wrote a Middle English translation of Sir Orfeo. It was actually an anonymous booklet that he published. It was actually 20 pages, and it was later attributed to him, but it was what he said would be a proper translation, Middle English translation of Sir Orfeo. The English translation of Sir Orfeo was unchanged after he wrote it throughout his life, and it was published posthumously along with Pearl and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. So Sir Orfeo was an anonymous late 13th to early 14th century Breton lay. It was likely a translation of Marie de France's non-extant poem, Lay d'Orfeo. This poem does not exist, but there are references to it. If you don't know Sir Orfeo, I'll give you a brief synopsis. It tells a story of a king who loses his wife to fairies. The wife is taken underground, literally into a rock, into fairyland. The king then roams the earth for 10 years searching for her. And the king has a great talent for playing the harp and even attracts animals around when he plays. He's finally able to enter the kingdom, and through his music and trickery, he's able to rescue his wife from the fairy king and bring her back to his kingdom. And Sir Orfeo is based on the Orpheus myth. So what was the attraction for Tolkien? I believe the story appealed to him because it's beautiful language and imagery, and the heroic rescue of the lady, who could be seen like as a motherly figure or as a Mary figure. I also think that the visual depiction of Sir Orfeo was of interest to Tolkien. As you can see here, the Apostles' Creed, it contains 23 lines. In Sir Orfeo, there are 22 sections. And the last section is the ending, and I'm not going to include that, but of the 21 main sections of the lay, 33% are between 20 and 24 lines, around the same length of the Apostles' Creed. And I think that visually it appealed to Tolkien. As a student of English pedagogy, I want to share some of my findings, the research methods that I used for textual analysis. This is the manuscript. It's the Middle English Breton lays. There's a QR code here. You can actually, if you have a device, if you want to look at the online text, it is free. It's a, I guess the main translation of Sir Orfeo. Sorry, it's not a translation. It's a like a version of Sir Orfeo. As I mentioned, Sir Orfeo was in different pieces, but it does have a gloss. Yeah, I used that gloss along with the University of Michigan Middle English Compendium. I also looked at some different versions from CSAM, his version of Sir Orfeo, and it was mentioned that Tolkien actually based his version of Sir Orfeo off of CSAM's version. But I'm most interested in Tolkien's English translation, and that's what I'm here to tell you about today. And you can see here were my manuscripts. Regarding my data, you don't have to look at all of this, it's too small. But I actually have 6 columns of data. 2 I left out. The 2 I left out were the CSAM's version of the lines that I was interested in. And the one I left out was Tolkien's version. And I didn't, as I was going through the lay line by line, I didn't really notice much difference between the Auchinleck manuscript, which is in Salisbury, and Las Calles. There wasn't much difference, so I left it out. Here on the left side, we see the line numbers, and the second column is the Auchinleck manuscript, which is in Las Calles and Salisbury. The middle is the gloss, and I use that for translation, and also in parentheses is the Middle English Compendium from the University of Michigan. So in some cases, of course, the complete gloss, the gloss didn't have a complete translation, so I used the Middle English Dictionary. And then on the right side is Tolkien's English translation. These are some of the major differences that I found throughout the poem. And in the yellow are the ones that I want to talk to you today about. Regarding the contrasting elements that I did ignore, this is an example that I didn't include. It's on line 364, and this is Tolkien's English translation. This was actually a mistake by Tolkien. And it appeared the way he defined the word, the Middle English word "almo" was as animal, and he wrote beasts and birds, but the actual translation is enamel. He actually fixed this mistake in 1945 for his 1922 Middle English Reader and Vocabulary, but it wasn't fixed in the posthumously published English translation of Sir Orfeo. So what this tells me is that either there's a lost document, either Tolkien's corrected manuscript of Sir Orfeo is missing, or he didn't even look at Sir Orfeo, didn't even fix it after knowing the mistake. But this kind of thing is something that I did not look at in my study. Significant deviations. This would be an example on line 160. This is an example of an addition to the text. The word wild is nowhere to be found in the original Middle English manuscript, which states in rivers, forests, frith with flowers. And the translation would be rivers, forests, woods with flowers. Or forested with flowers. Tolkien added the animals to this image, and I wonder if his faith could have any influence on this choice. And this is a picture of St. Anthony surrounded by animals. An example where Tolkien changed a word, I want to say it's a substitution, can be seen on line 435. The original text was literally translated before the king sat down. And I can put, here's the Middle English, before the king, he sat down and took his harp so miri of son. I'm sorry for my bad Middle English. But here you can see that Tolkien uses ground. He didn't have to do that, but he wrote ground. And of course, ground and sound is maybe a better rhyme than down and sound. But I believe that there could have been some influences from maybe John 8, where Jesus writes something on the ground. So Tolkien could have been alluding to this famous scene. These are some other examples from earlier in the poem. Tolkien uses kind of a meta technique here. He uses the word sing, where it should be relate or speak. This is in line 12 and 24. Sir Orfeo does have some rhyming. It's not shown here, but another word that Tolkien changed included was rhyming. So Tolkien's drawing attention to the poem and how the poem, or I should say lay, how the lay was originally spoken. It was probably through some kind of song, and it was not written down. But Tolkien is telling us that, and it could also have something to do with his faith and how important songs are. In Tolkien's manuscript, on the base manuscript, they don't perfectly line up, so that's why the left column line 42 and 28 are different. But in the first example, you see large in the original Middle English, and the translation is generous. And Tolkien says gifts of a king in his English version. His exact line is a courteous king whose gifts were good. Instead, the translation, suggested translation is generous and courteous he was also. Tolkien, I believe, accentuates the imagery of Christ, and also with the flesh and blood, as you can see on line 54. Body and bones is translated as flesh and bone, or the whole body, where Tolkien uses the word blood. Also, the final imagery I'm going to talk about today are sections 20 and 21 near the end of the poem. Tolkien translates what should be as the world goes. He writes about the world ending. And the next line, 574, he writes about gates. So this scene here is when Orfeo is talking to his steward when he returns, and Orfeo actually tests the steward to see if he's loyal, and the steward passes the test. And Orfeo says that if you hadn't passed the test, I was going to banish you. But Tolkien says that he was going to thrust him from the gates. So this image, it's very subtle, but I believe that Tolkien's being influenced in the 551 by the rapture, the end of the world, and also 574 by the gates. He didn't have to write this in his English version, but he did. So to conclude, there are many limitations of my study. My analysis is superficial, although I did do a deep explication. It's very subjective. I'm seeing what I want to see, and the changes are very subtle. I do believe, though, that Tolkien may have been influenced consciously or unconsciously and chose these words that he did because of his faith. The Lord of the Rings is considered to be an English Catholic parallel to the Book of Mormon's type of frontier fiction. McCullough quotes Brody here. It's obvious that Tolkien's Catholic faith influenced him, and that's why I wanted to bring this to you today. There's also some other limitations. I didn't look at Pearl. I didn't look at Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Those are translations that he did. And also, I don't think Tolkien wanted this to be published, else he would have published it. There is a lot of value here in this English translation. As I mentioned, there's one other translation that I found from 1914, but it isn't very good. It's Jesse Weston's. It's in my works cited. That translation, I think, is inferior to Tolkien's. And I don't believe that Tolkien was influenced at all from that. But I do believe that his work on Sir Orfeo did lay groundwork for his epic trilogy, which was published exactly 10 years later. The last thing I want to leave you with is the one thing that he removed from Sir Orfeo was the very last line before it says the end, and he removed amen. And I'm not sure why he did that, but I'll leave you with that. And these are my works cited. And thank you for listening to my presentation.